and welcome to Chaotic Riff Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.chaoticriff.com. My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and it's my great pleasure to be speaking with Envy of None bassist Andy Curran. And today, Andy, we're going to be talking about Envy of None, but you're known on the Canadian music scene for your other band, Coney Hatch. Is it fair to say you guys are pretty big in Canada?
We're big in Japan, Jason. No, we were a pretty big thing when we came out in the early '80s.
Yeah,
we certainly had a good ride with our videos being played on MTV. We had some great tours that we were on with Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance.
Wow.
Peace of Mind tour with Iron Maiden. So between that time period between like 1982 and 1985, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
We were all over the place. We played a ton of shows, and since then we've reunited. We're kind of like we have a funny T-shirt that says Spinal Hatch on it because we probably reunited as many times as Spinal Tap has, but we've still got a legion of dedicated fans here in Canada, and ironically, also in Europe. We had a really good following with Curran magazine, and so lately, before the pandemic hit, we were doing the majority of our shows in Europe, places like the UK and France and Belgium and Germany. So there was a bit of a resurgence when we released Coney Hatch 4, 30 years later. So
wow.
That's your long answer. That's just the long answer, Jason.
Well, it's an interesting answer because, I was amazed when I done a little research on the band, just how popular you guys were back in the day. Of course, being from America, like you said, you're not as well known here. But what's interesting, another band from Canada that never broke out in a huge way, I heard they were huge like over in Texas, was the Canadian band Moxie. Were you ever a fan of them growing up?
Oh my God! But I used to go see them. There's a legendary rock bar in Toronto. It's not around anymore, but it was called the Gasworks, and I think every sort of major Canadian rock band, that maybe even including Rush, might have played at the Gasworks. And I saw Moxie a bunch of times, and between sort of Moxie and Triumph broke out of Texas as well, and there's been obviously like Anvil and Honeymoon Suite and Killer Dwarves. There's been some sort of what I'd call almost like cult type bands that during that time came out of Canada. Some good. There was obviously some bigger ones like our boys in Rush, Loverboy, and Bryan Adams, but I would say that Coney Hatch were more of a cult band, to be honest with you. But we did, and we still do have a pretty good following.
And then, so talk about like what your following is. Like you said, you're huge in Japan. That kind of reminds me of the band Mr. Big, who they are huge in Japan. I mean, and they do like 3 or 4 shows a year, and they make bank. It's just amazing how the Japanese fans love their rock music.
Well, I have to be honest with you, buddy. I was joking when I said we're big in Japan, but
okay.
We did release our records there, and we never got to tour there. Sadly, that was on the bucket list of one of the countries that we'd love to play. But I would say, Canada first,
okay.
Maybe Europe second, and pockets of the U.S. We played at the Stanley Theater in Pittsburgh and headlined there, and we had a good, obviously because of the borders with Detroit and with Buffalo, we played a lot in upstate New York and in Michigan as well. So kind of tough for a Canadian band to break out of Canada in your country. It's so large and vast that it's tough to really penetrate that country. But those tours that we did back in the 80s, man, like other than the Deep South, we played everywhere in the States, and lots of good memories back then. I mean, I'm going back a long time ago, like almost 40 years.
Wow.
But,
yeah.
We still get people telling us that they saw us, in San Francisco at the Cow Palace or something like that. So it's nice that we can still play some shows, but we're kind of weekend warriors, to be honest with you. Like if Coney Hatch does, 6 or 7 gigs a year, that's a pretty busy year for us.
Well, and I'm bringing all this up because I want people to kind of know a little bit about your backstory before we get into Envy of None. But you know, and it's amazing because I think I was supposed to interview you maybe a couple years back when Coney Hatch first started touring again, and it didn't work out for one reason or another. But I went on YouTube myself to, okay, if I'm going to be talking to this guy Andy, I want to know a little bit about his band. And you guys got a lot of great videos people can check out on YouTube. I urge people to do that. And it's kind of like, how the hell did I not hear about this fantastic band before, you know?
Well, thank you for saying that. And you know, I'll tell you, not to boast really, but
Yeah.
you know, after I left Coney Hatch, the bands that I put together afterwards probably had more success. I got a Juno award with my band after I left Coney, and that's sort of the equivalent, the Canadian equivalent to a Grammy.
Yeah.
Then I had a band called Caramel that was signed with Geffen, another band called Leisure World in the late 90s,
Wow.
early 2000s that was signed to Artist Direct, and the sound definitely started changing and progressing, got a little less sort of what I'd call hard rock, classic rock,
Yeah.
being more alternative and heavy. And I like to think, you know, Jason, that was a progression towards Envy of None, and just kind of always trying to push the envelope and try a few different things stylistically. But no, that's a pretty good long ride, man. I consider myself one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like you had a career almost 40 years later, you know, so you're doing something right. And I think if Coney Hatch was a springboard for all the stuff that came after, I mean, you know, why not? And I brought up the band Moxie because, again, a couple years ago, your publicist, well, a number of years ago now, maybe about 15 years ago, they had a little reunion. They came back, I think, with Russ Dwarf, and I looked up, amazing story that band had. You know, the original singer was killed in a horrible motorcycle accident. And again, I was checking out some of the stuff. I thought, man, how is this band not, you know, more known about? And then I read up a little bit on the history, and I was amazed. Wow, what an interesting history this band is. You know, the other two bands, probably kind of huge in Canada, that of course we're going to be talking about, is there was Triumph and Rush. And what's sad about Triumph, and they were a great, huge band back in the day too, but it seems like a lot of people forgot about them, and that's why I'm glad they're putting out that new documentary. How big of a fan were you of those bands, you know, Rush and Triumph?
Oh, well, definitely a massive Rush fan. I'm kind of dating myself here, but the first time I ever saw Rush was at Massey Hall when they recorded All the World to Stage. That was their double live record, and being a kid from Toronto and following that band, they were the best thing since sliced bread here. Everybody knew about them. They were probably one of the first bands to have some international success, and that was a real treat to see that show. The opening act was Max Webster, another really cool Canadian band with an amazing guitar player, Kim Mitchell. But I grew up listening to Rush and watching them. They used to play our hockey arena here every New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
That was something that we would look forward to, and see them at Maple Leaf Gardens. And, you know, in terms of Triumph, many years later, they invited Coney Hatch to come out and open up some dates in Western Canada for them, and we struck up a friendship, you know, back then with both bands, and I'm still very close to all the members of Triumph, and like you, I'm proud that that documentary is really cool. Just actually started streaming on nugs.net in the U.S., and that was a fun documentary to watch. But to answer your question, I would think I'm a bigger fan of Rush, mainly because Geddy Lee was a big influence for me as a bass player.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
buying a Rickenbacker and learning all the songs, and you know, crazy that we ended up being on the same label as them many years later with Anthem Records, and being label mates with them, and then, you know, forming a friendship with those guys that's lasted all of these years.
Yeah, and you know, and I mean, who's not a Rush fan? Who's not a Triumph fan? But the thing that amazes me about Triumph is you go back to the 70s, they were huge. They were all over the radio, and then when you get to the 80s, they are also all over MTV back in the day. And you know, a number of years ago, they put out a greatest hits, you know, collection, and I got a copy of that, and man, it just reminded me how many great songs that band had. And it's kind of sad that so many people have forgotten about them. But, you know, Phil X, who's a current guitar player in Bon Jovi, he briefly replaced Rick Emmett, and I mean it's just amazing. But let's get into now talking a little bit about Rush and the new project Envy of None. How did that come about? Is this a band project? Is this Alex Lifeson solo project? Tell people a little bit about how this came together.
Yeah, I would say the best way to think of Envy of None, it really started out as a studio project. There was a couple things that happened that led to, I guess, the early roots of us all getting together. After Rush stopped touring after the R40 tour, and subsequently after our friend Neil Peart passed away, I remember, Alex and Geddy and Neil all became close friends of mine. So there was this interesting phone call that I got from Alex asking me if I would be up for playing some bass on a couple of his demos that he was working on at home. He was just messing around. And I jokingly said to him, like, don't you know any other bass players? Like, isn't there a guy on speed dial? And the shows are GL. And he said, no, Geddy's busy right now. He's working on his book. At that time, Geddy was probably working on the big book of Beautiful Bass. So not only was I honored, it was a bit of a pinch me moment to get a call from Alex. I bet,
yeah.
To play on some of this stuff. But I graciously accepted and agreed and sent him some stuff. And those tracks, Spy House and Cabaret Blues and Western Sunset, ironically all ended up on the Envy of None record. He had them as instrumental versions, and eventually Maya Wynn sang on them. But Alex basically said, Andy, if you do this for me, I'd be happy to return the favor. So I had mentioned to him that I had got connected with Maya Wynn, who's the vocalist for Envy of None. She's from Portland, Oregon. The rest of us are Canadian boys. Okay. And I had met Maya. She's a winner of an online radio talent contest. And we just ended up talking and forming a friendship. And she said, if ever you're working on anything, I'd be happy to sing on it. And so I sent her a couple early demos. And she sang a song called Shadow. And I subsequently sent that to Alex and said, I think I found somebody really special here. I think she's an amazing vocalist, but has a great grasp of harmonies, and her lyrics are really, really quite developed for someone as young as she was at the time. I think she was maybe 20 years old when we met. And I also played it for my friend Alp Angelini, and Alp is an award-winning engineer mixer here in Canada, but he also is a multi-instrumentalist. So both of those guys, when they heard those demos that Maya had sang on that I had been working on, they said, this is awesome, we'd love to play on it. And next thing you know, Jason, we had one song turned into 3, turned into 6, and we just kept going because everybody really, really connected. There was a good chemistry. We didn't have a label, we didn't have a manager or a lawyer or a publishing company or anything. It was really just 4 musicians sharing ideas and finishing them off, and it was during the pandemic, so it was a great use of some downtime. So that's kind of how the whole thing started.
What a great story. And Andy, talk about that pinch me moment you had when Alex first called and asked you to take part in this. I mean, that has to be an amazing feeling that you're like the first bass player he's done anything with in 40 years since working with Geddy Lee. This will be the first time he's worked with another, bass player and songwriter, and that's got to be a pretty big, amazing kind of feeling. And then to find out,
it was a little bit intimidating too to think about it. I kind of wrapped my head around it. Listen, don't even try to go head to head with Geddy Lee. It's a steel cage match. You're going to lose badly, Curran. But it's different type of material, and Geddy's quite a technician, and a lot of my bass approach is really just laying down the groove and working with the drummer and the drum tracks just to create a foundation. So I'm a very different bass player than Geddy Lee, but you're absolutely right to have somebody who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Alex Lifeson, call you and say, would you play bass on my stuff? It's an incredible honor, and as you said, a pinch me moment for sure.
And Andy, the thing that I love about the story so far about Envy of None, talking to you and hearing the story, is not just do you get that pinch me moment and get that call from Alex, but that you end up having such a huge influence in the sound of the band, not just your bass playing, but I'm talking about getting the singer involved, because people got to know if you're expecting this to sound, and I was guilty of this myself, sound anything like, Rush, or, it's really an Alex Lifeson solo project and he's doing lead singing. It sounds nothing like that. And I think that's part of what not only is a beautiful part about this, but I think that might be why it works so well, because it doesn't sound like Rush. It sounds, I dare say, leans more towards like a kind of, maybe, I don't want pop album is right, but it sounds nothing like Rush, but I love what it sounds like,
Well, thank you for saying that, and it is certainly a departure in stylistically sounding records than what we've done before, but I think that's just really the combination of the players, and like Alex, a lot of people, and the reception's been really, really positive. A lot of people have said, is it his solo project, is it a side project, and really it isn't. It's a collaboration with 3 other musicians. Obviously, he's the heat-seeking missile, and everybody knows Alex. I think we're getting a lot of attention because of him, but if he was on the line right now, he would tell you that he's a quarter member of this project, and we all feel that, Maya Wynn, our vocalist, is probably the underdog star in this record, man. She is just the icing on the cake as far as we're concerned. But nice that we could stretch a little bit, and Alex told me that it's been a very rewarding and almost a very, I don't know, he was in a pretty dark place as Geddy was after Neil passed, and this has kind of brought him out of that tough time, and so I think that's a pretty special thing to be involved with something to help a friend out of a really tough time too,
Yeah, it could have gone, a couple of ways. Like you said, after losing Neil Peart, he worked with the other 2 guys for about 40 plus years. And so, and Neil Peart, 40 years on, he's still considered the new guy in Rush. And what's amazing about his story is once he joined Rush, he became the guy that wrote all the lyrics, even though he was drummer. That's kind of a different story than most musicians have, but he really was a big part of the lyrics and the sound of Rush. And I could see why they didn't want to replace him. And if you guys had gone in there trying to make this Rush 2.0, you would have had fans who might have liked it, but they would say, "Oh, you guys are a Rush clone. You're trying to live off of his success he had with that." And I think you're very smart to kind of go with your own sound, go and kind of just create whatever came out.
Well, it was never even an option.
Yeah.
I know for Alex that there was not any discussion about trying to do Rush 2.0. If he was on the call with us now, he would tell you, Jason, if anybody wants to listen to a Rush record, we have we've got dozens of them. They should go back and listen to those. This is not him trying to extend that project. It's a different thing,
And I would think too, like after losing, your bandmate Neil, as far as Alex is concerned, he'd be like, if you guys went in and tried to do that, he'd be like, no, I've already done that. And I think maybe that's why this was such a refreshing project for him, because first thing he's done since Rush, and it is so different. I think it's a lot easier trying to create, I don't know, like a new sound or a new vehicle for your music. As opposed to trying to do the same thing, like you said, that you'd previously done.
Yeah, I think, it's tough for, I'm the first guy to admit it, that, if I go out and buy a record of somebody that I really love, I'm not going to be too happy if it's a real departure, but it's one of those things that you have to be respectful that musicians are on a ride, and it was quite rewarding for us not to remain in that box and to actually just be able to step outside of it. So in terms of stretching stylistically and not trying to do a Rush 2.0 or not do anything that Cody Hatch would have done, it was intentional. It was absolutely intentional.
Good intent there, because I'll tell you, I got to honestly tell you, I think the best compliment I can give you, Andy, is that when I heard about this project and they started putting information out there about it, I did have certain expectations. I did think, okay, well, this is Alex Lifeson's going to have a certain sound, and you know what? it sounded nothing like I expected, but kind of in a good way. You know what I mean? It was like a pleasant surprise. Wow, I can really get off on this. This is something different. At the same time, it doesn't sound like Rush. It doesn't sound like every other rock band out there. It sounds unique. It sounds, you guys got an original sound, and that's what I really picked up after listening to the album. That's what I love about it.
Well, and thank you for saying that. And as I mentioned to you, we knew that there would probably be a very vocal Rush audience that were expecting that, or Rush fans. But I would say for the most part, and you know, from what we've seen in the comments, like I think the acceptance rate has been pretty darn high at maybe 80 or 90% of the people being very, very complimentary about the music, and first couple of weeks it came out, some of the chart numbers we got were just staggering. I mean, we were the number one alternative on Amazon the week we came out, number 5 emerging artists on Billboard, and we weren't really expecting any of that. We were kind of just happy to put the record out there and see if people enjoyed it. So I mean, we've been sort of caught off guard with the reception.
You know, from your own career,
how positive it's been.
You know, from your own career, what the record industry used to be like. But you guys are getting the kind of reception you would, if you were around in the '80s. And could you imagine if you had support from something like MTV? I mean, and you're still putting music videos out there. That's what I love, because a lot of bands have that approach that nobody's buying CDs, nobody's why bother making a music video? But I tell you, the few you made so far, they've all been different. They've all been really stand out. Like you said, you go on YouTube, you check out any of the tracks. People are checking this stuff out. People are loving it, and that's kind of one thing I love about the modern age. Like, people can, what's this band in the you get a chance to go on YouTube. You can check out the songs before you even go and buy the album, and they're just that good that like, I want to get the album now. Now, you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you're signed to Deco Entertainment, is that correct?
We're signed to a really cool label in the UK. They're called Snapper.
Oh, Snapper.
Snapper K-Scope. They're the same folks that were responsible for Porcupine Tree. So, they're used to stepping out a little bit and not doing stuff that's mainstream. So it worked out pretty well for us. When they heard the record, they were pretty excited about it, and it felt like a little family. It actually almost reminded us of Anthem Records. Really, Anthem Records. They got a very small staff, but those that are there are pretty enthusiastic about the record. So it felt like a perfect fit for us.
And people can get physical copies as well as on digital sites?
They can, absolutely. The record physically came out on last week on a couple different formats of vinyl.
Yeah.
There's actually 3 different formats of vinyl. There's a deluxe version, and then there's a blue and a white vinyl and a black vinyl. But the deluxe version also comes with a 23-page booklet and a couple CDs,
CD
version, and then some bonus tracks. And then, of course, if you just want to buy the CD itself. And then our merch guy last week asked if we would be interested in doing it on cassette, and I just was zapped back to the 80s. I was
wow.
Who the heck's buying? Who's buying cassettes? And he said a lot of folks are buying them and kind of making them, I don't know, like putting them in their man case and displaying that they actually have a cassette. So yeah, it's out on all different formats.
You'd be surprised. I mean, one label I know in the U.S. that's doing that is Rat Pack Records. That's the label John Corabi's on. But they've started doing that with some of their newer releases. And that does take you back to the day. I'm old school. I still love the physical product. That's why I love to, like, if I had your CD right now, I'd be listening to it in my car on the way to work. I love to look at the artwork. I mean, I remember back in the day, like, seeing Kiss Destroyer, Iron Maiden's Number of a Beast in the record store. Remember when they still had record stores? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. It looks so cool, though. I have to get that.
I know, and Record Store Day has really been, promoting vinyl for these little tiny stores and stuff. So it's amazing to see the resurgence in physical product come back. And I'm like you. I love to I love to. I've got a vinyl collection. I've never sold any of my old vinyl from the old days, and I love spending time on the artwork and just going deep on it, you know.
And what's cool is I've talked to people about this. You know, over the last 15 years, vinyl has really made a comeback. And the cool thing for bands about, you know, if you can get your stuff released on vinyl, I do believe a lot of people still, if they get a nice vinyl package, for example, I think they're a little more willing to pay $35 for that. You know, and it's a great way for bands to kind of break even, because let's be honest, a lot of people aren't buying CDs, but I mean, I talk to guys that, you know, they don't even have a turntable, and one guy was telling me, I don't even have a turntable, but I'm buying everything on vinyl just because I want to have a collection, you know?
Yeah, I know, it's really cool to see, and you're right, like I do think that people are willing to pay a little bit more money for vinyl, and the experience is cool, you know? We think it's a bit of a headphone record, you know, you put it on, and we spend a lot of time on sounds and layering and things like that, so I think it's a perfect record to just, we really feel it's a headphone record. You put it on, you just go for a ride on it, you know, and nothing better to do that with than the vinyl experience.
And I gotta ask, I mean, like, if you guys never made another album, you made quite the statement with this one. I hope there will be future. Has there been any talk, like, I mean, you just released this, I understand, and you're kind of living off, you know, the love for that right now, but, you know, is this a long-term project? Have you guys talked about that? Any chance of live shows down the line?
Well, we have absolutely spoken about doing an Envy of None 2 record. We had such a good time recording that I think there's a very strong likelihood that we'll try to do a second record. And, you know, in terms of live, though, that's a bit of a bigger commitment for everybody. And Alex, as you know, has spent a lot of time on the road, so I don't think he's in a great hurry to get back out there to play live shows. But he did say that, you know, he might entertain some one-offs or maybe festival shows. So I think the record's relatively new. Like, I think it's only been out maybe just a month now. So we're gonna just sort of see how this ride goes. We got a couple more singles and videos that we want to work on. So I think it's too early to say whether we'll do any live shows.
Well, like, even a couple one-offs, like you said, that would be cool, just to kind of get the band out there, and you could have some live videos for people to check out. Now, the current single is Never Said I Love You. I love the vibe of that song. Talk a little bit about that. You know, and it's a pretty cool video too, if people can check out.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's certainly one of the most immediate sounding songs on the record. It's definitely got a bit of a pop edge to it, with a little, like, alternative, almost like 80s vibe to it, or 80s or 90s. But we that was one of the earliest songs that we had kicking around, and we really think that Maya did a great job on it. But it's like, it is, I think it's, as I said, maybe one of the more instantly recognizable sort of, okay, this feels like it could even be a radio tune.
That's what I was getting ready to say. It's like real pop friendly, like a real radio kind of friendly song. And how has radio been responding to this? I mean, you know, terrestrial radio versus, you know, the internet radio.
I think, like you said, kind of a little bit confused. There's this expectation. They look at Alex's name and they see my name and they go, oh yeah, okay, so classic rock radio station will be like, this is not what we were expecting, right? Yeah. But we are getting a lot of spins on sort of new music shows, and there's been some alternative and AAA stations that have added it, and so it's been a slow build there. But I got to be honest with you, like, it was never our intention to try to make some kind of a radio hit record. We were just proud of what we were working on, and if people dug it, cool. It wasn't like we had expectations of going out and chasing it and trying to make it a radio hit, you know. So it's been interesting, but the feedback's been pretty good. But
to my ears, it's like just that, you know, a lot of the songs, but that song in particular is like a great little pop tune, and I think anybody who's a rock fan can get into this band. And like I said, I'll be the first to go on record and say it's not what I expected, but like in a pleasant way. Especially, I almost kind of agree with you that as big of a part as you and Alex are on this, I mean, probably one of the most pleasant surprises is your singer. It's like, wow, who is she and where has she been hiding? You know, I mean, what a discovery. You know.
Yeah, she's got a real gift for, like I find her vocal approach certainly very melodic, but pretty evocative and sultry, and, she's got an amazing grasp of harmony too, so it didn't matter how nasty or nice we had our music sounding she just fit in, and even tracks like Liar or Enemy that are actually quite heavy.
I loved Liar, that was a great track too.
She manages to be the icing on top of that, and I think she's going to have a real long career ahead of her. And as I said, we do plan on trying to do another record with her, but she's got her own solo career, and she's been out there, working hard. So we're happy to expose the world to that little girl from Portland.
Yeah, and I don't imagine that he would, but like when you first brought her up, like did he have any objections, like being a female singer, or what was his thoughts on that? Or he's like, send me something so I can hear.
You know what? It was never ever even spoken about whether it was male or female.
Yeah.
I sent over that track, and Alex was instantly drawn by her voice, as was Alfio, and I just said, I think we did. This one turned out so great. Why don't we try to write some more tracks? And so we ended up doing that, but it never came up, at all.
That's cool.
Being male or female or younger than us or anything like that.
Because at the end of the day, she just kills it, and that's what matters. And like I said, I think she's a secret ingredient to this product of why, as far as the band, I think why it's going to work and why people are going to love it. I mean, just because vocally does she kill it, but it's like nothing I've heard before. I mean, see, that's the thing. I think if you guys had gone in there and trying to sound like Rush, and she's trying to do her version of Geddy Lee, it would have come off as she's trying to be a Geddy Lee clone, where she's got her own talent. So why not put that out there for people to hear?
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, the conscious effort to not really look in the rearview mirror, not even think about this.
What came before?
Of any kind of a Rush project. It really was a standalone thing on its own with four very different musicians, but the chemistry, as I told you, was pretty instantaneous, and we all hit it off really well.
And so, like, obviously, you're friends with Alex. You've known him a number of years, and you guys are both in Canada. But as far as recording this music, like, were you guys ever in the same studio, in the same room? Do you guys do it at your own home studios? What was that process like?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. When we first started the project, just prior to the pandemic, Maya flew to Toronto, and we tracked some drums with some friends of ours here. A guy by the name of Tim Oxford, who plays in a band called Arkells that are very popular here in Canada, and then David Quinton Steinberg, who used to be in the Dead Boys and Stick Baiters and played in his own punk band called The Mods. He's a very good friend of ours. So we took some drums with those guys, and then we had Maya sing a couple tracks, and then when the pandemic hit, we all started working remotely and finished off a bunch of songs that way. We did a few sort of I'll get geeky for you for a second. Okay. There's a program called Audio Movers, and it gives you the ability to listen to a mix in real time and to do a Zoom call at the same time. So we ended up, doing a lot of those calls and addressing and kind of having like little mini band meetings virtually. And then at the end of the record, everybody got together and we kind of celebrated, having finished the record. So long story short, we only got together twice throughout the whole making of the record. The rest was all done remotely from our home studios.
Now, what about the songwriting? I mean, I imagine that you and Alex kind of wrote the riffs, but as far as the lyrics, were you all involved with that, or was that kind of her department, and you guys just allowed her to do her thing?
Yeah, it's a bit of a combination of everything. Like, I brought a lot of stuff early to the record for ideas. As I said, Alex brought in Spy House and Capital Blues and Western Sunset. Maya, she was responsible for bringing in and I talking about it before the songs got up and running. And as a fellow lyricist and vocalist, I had some ideas that I said to her, hey, I want to share these with you, and if you like them, please run with it. If you don't, no problem, start fresh. And for the most part, she would grab little seeds of ideas, like on Liar and Enemy and Never Said I Love You, and then we felt that it was important to give her her own platform to sing what she wanted to sing about and to also write her own lyrics. So she kind of took the ball and ran with it, and I think she did a really, really fine job of that.
Because I asked that because in listening to the entire CD, it just it's one of those things where I can kind of hear everybody in the project brings their influence into it, and that's why I think this band's got such a great sound. So just a couple more questions for you, Andy, and then I'll let you go. So I was curious. I know one of the hardest things is always coming up with a band name. Envy of None, pretty kind of original sounding name. Is there much of a story how you guys came up with that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a funny story there, Jason. We were about halfway through the project. Maya said to me, she called me up and she said, I guess we better come up for a name with this for this project. And I don't know why, I had been kicking around this name, Middle of Nowhere, and I said, every time I talk to you, it seems like you're in the middle of nowhere, because she's not right in Portland, Oregon. She's just kind of outside of it. So for the longest time, we were using the working name Middle of Nowhere. And when we told our lawyer about it, he said, well, have you guys done a name search? And we said, no. And he said, well, I'm going to do a name search, and let's make sure that nobody else has this name. And lo and behold, there was like 4 or 5 other artists or bands that were called Middle of Nowhere. And I said, oh my God, we're going to have to come up with a new name here. And this is our lawyer just happens to be the drummer David Steinberg as well, and David Quinton Steinberg. And he said, well, I've had a name kicking around for a while that nobody's used, and it's Envy of None. And told us that he had seen a quote by a philosopher named Ovid, and I don't know, there was something about it. We really liked the way it just kind of rolled off your tongue.
Yeah.
It didn't really have any connotations of
it's kind of
band or a metal band or a prog band, and so we just went with it, and it just seemed to fit what we were doing.
I think it kind of works now. That's a good kind of lead up to my next question, which is how would you describe this band? Because I think you guys could be a lot of things. I think you could be a rock band. I think you could be a progressive band. I think you could be considered alternative. You got a little. I mean, it's one of those albums and bands where, kind of like Queen. Queen has a song, like probably Stone Cold Crazy. That's as close to metal they're going to get, and then they have something like Somebody to Love, a big radio hit.
Yeah, or Amazing on a Sunday Afternoon, or Bicycle, and then they go to, like you said, Stone Cold Crazy or something. But I think we do have a nice mixture of some up tempo stuff, some down tempo, some trippy stuff, some stuff that's a bit edgy. I think there's a good cross section of that, and I think it's a bit of a ride too. That's what I would mention to you. Like you put on the headphones, and this record kind of takes you on a ride. A musical journey. Yeah, I mean, it really does, and that's what I love about it. And it kind of to say this, but it's true. Like I put this up there with, say, something like Van Halen 1. You guys made that huge of a statement, I think, on this album, and I think it allows you, if you do another album, where very much like we're talking about Queen or Van Halen, you're not pigeonholed to, okay, well, this is what they sound, this is their sound. There's that expectation, you're a ballad band, and that's all you can do. You can do whatever the hell you want. That's what I think. I always say, I think Alex Lifeson has earned the right to do whatever the hell he wants. Personally, but no, I do think you're right. I think we covered enough territory on that record that it's not going to shock anybody if we come up with something that's even a little bit more outside left and right. So we're positioned pretty cool to follow up on this one.
Yeah, and you probably know what I'm talking about here, but like a lot of people listening to this interview are gonna, when for example, when they hear the song Helter Skelter, they think that's a Motley Crue song, but no, that's actually a Beatles song. A lot of us grew up on the Motley Crue version, but that's the closest the Beatles ever got to metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And my elder sisters loved the Beatles, and I remember when they bought the Revolution record, and it started with all that heavy distorted guitar, and I was like, what the hell is this, right? But when you listen to the Beatles record, it had so many different moods and textures on it, and they were definitely not one-trick ponies. So I don't know. It's interesting that you brought it up. It honestly wasn't conscious. We didn't go out and have meetings and say, okay, this song's going to be completely different. We actually just were working on ideas that everybody was excited about.
Well, see, and that's the cool thing about this.
Cool that we were able to do that.
That's the cool thing I dig about the band's story so far is that, like, you guys aren't there are no boundaries. There's nothing you're not willing. It's all about if you get off on it, if the fans get off on it, if it's a good sounding song. It's not like we have to do a ballad, we have to do a dance track. It's whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah, honestly, that was sort of the
blueprint.
I don't know, that was the bar that we set was that if we liked the idea, then that was what we were going to work on. And sometimes after we had finished the song, we'd share with each other 6 or 7 ideas, and it was like, okay, which one does everybody like? Do they like idea number 2, 3, and 4, and whichever one was the one that got the most votes, that was what we ended up working on.
And like I said, Andy, you even have a career. We've been talking a lot about Alex Lifeson and Rush, but you've got a huge career too, as you said, like with Coney Hatch. I mean, I'm sure you do have your own group of fans, that as you're walking around Canada, come up to you and they tell you how much they love the band, how much they loved your music, what an inspiration you were. What's that like when fans come up and have those conversations with you?
It's really special when somebody says something like that, because I immediately think of, I've always told everybody this whenever I do any interviews, like, I'm a music fan first. So a lot, like, people will come up to me and say, dude, you were the soundtrack of my teen years.
Wow.
I could say the exact same thing to Joe Perry and Steven Tyler if I met them, or Michael Schenker from UFO, or Joe Walsh, and so those songs, when I hear some of those artists that I mentioned to you, like the Edgar Winter band, those songs just instantly transport me back to when I was a teenager, loving music and just exploring different bands and artists. And so when somebody comes up and says that to you about your own music and saying, Andy, the stuff that you did with Coney or with Legion World, that's like they're still my favorite records. That's really rewarding.
Yeah, and you're taking back to like great rock music. All the stuff we've been talking about. I mean, you just brought up Edgar Winter. I mean, Free Ride is probably like one of his all-time favorite, biggest hits. But I mean, that song's still being played on the radio 40 years later. Edgar Winter, he's kind of gone into retirement. He doesn't play out live too much. But I mean, again, that's going back to the day when a great rock song was just a great rock song.
You think about that too, like at Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Becoming an actual radio hit, and it was an instrumental, and it's like you said, like good music finds its way. The cream rises to the top. So it's to answer your question, man. When somebody says that the music that I've been involved with was a part of their lives, it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, and just to get a little deep, because again, you took me back bringing up Edgar Winter. I mean, what a great songwriting musician! What a great band that was back in the day. I mean, and then I can't believe it. I didn't know this at the time, but I just recently discovered, Frankenstein. Free Ride featured the great late Ronnie Montrose on guitar and Rick Derringer. I mean, I had no idea that's what he did before he had his own band, and so it's cool to go back and listen to these old classic records and find stuff like that out.
I couldn't agree with you more, enjoying music and sort of going down the rabbit hole, that's I think about, here's a perfect example, Frank Zappa, my brother listened to Frank Zappa, but I ended up getting turned on to Terry Bozzio's drumming and Patrick O'Hearn, which led me to discover Missing Persons, and next thing I know, Warren Cucurullo is in
Duran Duran
with all kinds of different bands, and so it's really nice
Yeah.
all these other musicians and monsters, as you said, So it's that's why I love being a music fan.
And I got to thank you for taking time to talk to me today, Andy. As you can tell, I'm a real lover of music, and I didn't know a whole lot about you today, but I figured this guy's got a story, and the fact that he's playing in this band with Alex Lifeson, he's probably got quite an interesting story, and I was right. So we went way above the 20 minutes I originally was planning to talk to you, but that's all right, because I think when people listen back to this, they're gonna just dig. Not just hearing about the new band, but hear what you've been part of, all these years. And that's the final question for today. So we've been talking about Envy of None, but do you have any other solo projects you're working on that you want to let everybody out there know about?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I'm looking forward to doing some more writing with everybody from Envy of None, but I've got a couple solo things that I'm working on right now that are sort of closer to my old roots of, pretty dark, heavy, in-your-face stuff, and I'm working on a project with Alfio Annabellini, and it's called The Daredevils Incorporated.
Wow.
But on my Instagram, Andy Curran Official, I usually sort of keep people up to speed on what I'm doing there, so that's a good place to if you're interested in keeping track of what yours truly is up to. So, and I like to mix in my love of hockey and sports and stuff like that, so it's music on my Instagram.
Oh, that's cool. Well, we all have... We all have other interests. I love talking about classic movies and TV shows and stuff like that. So it's great to have other things that you're interested in now. And in regards to the solo stuff you're working on, I was curious. Do you do any of the lead vocals on that stuff, or do you have other guys come in and sing your songs?
Well, for that new project that I just mentioned to you on for the Daredevils Incorporated, I'll be handling all of the vocals on that. So I've taken a break on Envy of None and let somebody else have the spotlight, but I'm missing it a little bit, so I'm gonna get my yayas out with that one, and I'll be singing on all of it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, again, thanks for taking time to talk to us. It's been a lot of fun. The interview we just did, I'm planning to post it probably within the next week or two. I will let Chip know once it goes up, and if you enjoy doing this, Andy, let's keep in touch, and anytime you have anything to promote, I'd love to talk to you again.
Oh, absolutely, buddy. I had a great time, and your questions were great, and thank you for helping spread the word. I really appreciate it.
I promise, because when we post the interview, I'm gonna post some of the videos and tracks so people can know exactly what we're talking about, and that's the whole point of doing this, is to spread the love about the music that we love.
Awesome, buddy. Well, I really appreciate your time today, and thanks again. And you take care of yourself, and yeah, absolutely. Let's keep in touch. And Chip's my guy. If ever you need to find me, he's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and I'll just say this about Chip. He's given me a lot of great artist interview over the years, and you brought up as one of your influences, I think, Michael Schenker. I mean, that's got to be a pretty cool feeling that you got the same publicist as a legendary Judas Priest and Michael Schenker.
Oh my God, is it ever? He's the best, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's been doing it for years. I mean, he's like the golden standard, I think, as far as publicists. But I'll leave it at that. But thanks again, Andy. You have a nice day.
You too, man. Take care, Jason. Thank you.
Anytime. Bye-bye.
See you then. Bye.
Chaotic Riff Magazine.